As we enter this new normal, you have to evaluate the methods you're currently using against those you used previously, and you have to ask this question: which method will lead to more stories of success in line with our mission and desired outcomes as we go forward?
When churches reopen, we can't just do what we've done previously. Everything has changed in our world, and as leaders and churches, we have to adapt to a new normal. My name is Charlie Broxton, and I'm here with my co-founder, Brian Berman, and we are the Transforming Church Culture podcast. Churches are reopening across the country at different rates and different stages, and as we reopen, how do we determine what changes and what stays the same? That's what we're going to look at today on our podcast.
Well, Charlie, that's the good news, is that if you have strong mission and vision, and if you had it before the pandemic, those don't need to change. That's something that you want to keep the same, because that's going to drive what you actually do change. And mission and vision, they're really defined by two questions. And so any church, any organization, you need to be asking yourself, and you need to do it regularly. You ask, why do we exist? Why are we even doing this? And sometimes we get kind of churchy in that, and we give these answers that we know we're supposed to say, but they're not really why we exist. So to be honest with yourself and say, why do we exist? But the second one, which really drives your vision, is what does success look like? In other words, if we keep doing this for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, for 2 years, what are the stories we want to be telling that we would be excited about and that we would share with others? So our answer to those two questions, those should be things that stay the same.
Yeah, and it's funny, in working in churches and in ministry over the last, it's been 30, 35 years, we know that churches struggle with mission and vision. And so I think it's safe to assume that we need to take care of that first.
Yeah, and regardless of the pandemic, whether we're in it, whether there's no pandemic when it gets over, the calm seasons of ministry we all have, the difficult, the chaos ministries, you have to have this strong sense of why you exist and where you are heading. That's what really keeps the rudder there, keeps you on track. That's what keeps you solid.
Well, let's say that churches are solid in their mission and vision. And we're going to talk, for those that are thinking we're not even solid there, we're going to talk about mission and vision next week. But for those that feel solid in their mission and vision, what else should stay the same as we move forward into this new normal?
Well, I think at this point, everything else can change. And that's why this can be so adventuresome and so fun. Because when we keep our why and what the same, and we have those solid and we're committed to those, then the how, the who, the when, those can totally change based upon circumstance or season, shifts in society and culture, because these are our model. And so here's something I've been encouraging churches with. There's some long established churches, and they've been given this incredible gift. It's kind of like Halley's Comet. It rarely comes along. I was talking to a 150-year-old church the other day, and they've always wanted to have a chance to start over. They've wanted to be like a church plant. And they just got this gift where they're still closed, but they're putting together their reopening plan. They don't have to go back to what they were before. And so what Andy Stanley said about marry the mission and date the model, I think rings really true here, that when we can stay committed to why we exist and what it looks like to succeed, we can change all of those other things.
That's great. You think about it. How many times have we thought in ministry, I wish I could start over with this because I would have done X, Y, and Z differently. And now you can. So What are some examples of how churches can change as we move forward?
I think one of the obvious ones, Charlie, and hopefully people are picking up on this, is the effectiveness of being online, where churches are realizing they're having more viewers, even more guests who are engaging with their online services than wherever in the seats of their sanctuary or their auditorium. And people are attending their church that really would never walk into their building. And so for many churches, one of the things I think they really have to consider, one of the biggest priorities, is they can't stop what they're doing effectively online. That as we enter this new normal, you evaluate what's currently working versus what you previously used. And ask what leads to more stories? What's going to help us really accomplish our why and our what? And I think we're discovering these online ministries are really doing that. Churches have just struggled. They've tried things in the past, but not really done it effectively. And in fact, a lot of that I think is done with camera work, that somebody watching online has felt like they're watching a service that's for somebody else. Mm-hmm. But now churches have discovered how to do online services effectively. And I think that's something that we really need to look at going forward, continuing to do.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's been a fun time for me to learn. As right now, I'm in a position where I oversee a ministry to emerging generations. So it's pretty much birth through college and young adult years. And one of the things I've learned about this time is that you can connect with these younger generations digitally in a way that I never even thought possible. We obviously youth groups done online the way it's done now, but I've also created these touch points where one time a week we meet and we read the Bible together. We can do it in smaller groups and larger groups, just depends on the week, but we're reading the Bible together online. We're not meeting somewhere. It's really easy for students to do that. And what's crazy is I am invited into their room at that time. They're invited into my life, which would be creepy if we'd done that in person. I can't do that,
That's right.
Meet with a student in their bedroom, but I can online. And you get to ask questions. They can share things. It's been a fun time to learn, these are some things that even when we can resume meeting together as a church, meeting together as ministries, I'm still going to keep some of these elements of online ministry because it gives you a chance to connect in ways you can't otherwise.
Yeah, and it's created more opportunities, is what you've just shared. Is maybe one of those students who doesn't have the traditional 6:30 to 8 Wednesday night time slot available, invites you in and prioritizes other times. And so we've created more opportunities. People can watch our online things when they want to, rather than just this one dictated hour per week. And that's why I think as we look at our new normal, we can't ignore or overlook the shifts that have taken place in our society. And we have to figure out if we're going to effectively influence and impact those around us, we've got to not just know what they are, but kind of understand these shifts. Because as we look to reopen and move into this new normal, we're going to say yes to some things, but I think more importantly, we're going to say no to some things. And one of the principles that we teach when you and I go in and do strategic planning retreats, one of the things we talk about all the time is what you say no to will define you more than what you say yes to. And one of the things right now, as we look to reopen, I think people are saying, how can we go back to what we were before? Which is the wrong question. The question is, what do we need to say no to that we were doing before because it was ineffective? And now we've got this fresh opportunity, this gift that we were talking about, where we don't have to go back to do this. So this is really the optimal time for us to say no to some things. And so as leaders, I think leaders need to learn that skill of how to be able to say no. It's hard.
Oh my gosh. I think about reasons it's hard for me to say no: fear of change, fear of making the wrong decision.
Oh yeah.
Fear of others' disapproval, which is always a big one for us in ministry. So for those of us, all of us that struggle with saying no, what's your advice? How can we learn that skill to say no and to say it with purpose and vision behind us, because we know there's a greater yes out there?
That's good. And what you said, how do we learn it? I think it can be learned. In fact, you mentioned displeasing people. I'm a recovering people pleaser. It has always been a huge struggle of mine. And so here's kind of two things that work for me, and I've seen them working for others too, is first, you have to understand the reason why you're saying no. It's got to be mission, vision driven, focused. It can't be I'm just saying no because I'm in charge. And I remember my kids, my three boys, they're not even kids, they're all in their 20s now, which just makes me old. But one of the principles that I was taught was don't play the dad card. And what that meant to me is, especially when they're in their high school years, is I didn't get to say no and say, well, you can't do that, or I say no because I'm the dad. I told them, I want you to obey, but you can always ask me why. And I have to be able to explain that to you. And if I can't give you a good answer, then I'm not going to say no to that again. And here's how that plays out is if I would have just said, hey, it's no because I'm the dad, that means that once they're the dad, they get to arbitrarily make decisions too, and they wouldn't understand that why. So I think it's important as we say no in business or to our congregations especially, that we need to be able to explain the why we're doing this no. And here's the other side of it. I think we have to be excited to cast vision and say yes to a lot of things and be able to say yes to the right things, because it can't always be no. We get worn out like that and we just become jerks if we're always saying no. And so in this new normal, it's not just no, 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 no. It's here's yes, because we've learned some things. We've tried some things. We've said yes to some things we didn't say yes to before. And so now we're going to keep saying yes to those and say no to some other things. You mentioned some of the practical examples with your students, the online groups. We're hearing churches are having great success with these. And so to keep those going, and just even make them more effective, it can be a both and going forward instead of an either or. Another thing we're hearing about all the time are video devotionals, where people on social media sites and pages, they're just popping up. Some are 30 seconds, some Instagram are 60 seconds. You've got them 2 minutes or 3 minutes, but just little devotional thoughts that people are liking and sharing and are impacting them through the week. So there's some other things that we can keep saying yes to that make it easier to say no.
Yeah, and it goes back to something we talked about in a previous episode, but it really is trying to figure out new ways to connect with people and the world around us that we didn't have the opportunity to before, but this new normal and what we're coming out of has given us that opportunity.
Yeah, great point. Because if we just return to business as usual, just the pre-pandemic, nothing learned, nothing new, we're going to alienate our church from especially our neighborhoods or our communities, because everybody's saying there's new normal, there's all these changes. And so for us to say, oh, nothing's changed, is going to distance and put some roadblocks there. But the other thing that can happen is we're not going to be able to connect with our community. So in most cases, I don't feel like people who aren't in our church are going to be showing up at our building anytime soon. They're not waiting for us to reopen so they can go to church for the first time. There's a fear there. Now, there's always a fear to walk inside church. You don't know what's going to happen in there if you're unchurched. But now we're talking about pandemics. We're talking about, will these things spread? What's going to happen? But if they're connected on social media, we got to leverage that. That's a connection like we've never had before with them.
Yeah, and they're seeing that church doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be awkward. Jesus is there and he's real, and they get a chance to see it in the comfort of their own homes, which may then encourage them to step into our buildings at some point in time and become part of our communities. And that's an exciting thing. It's another avenue for ministry as we move forward. Thinking about this as reflecting back on what we've talked about, I think the biggest thing that jumped out for me is that our vision is first. How we go about it is second. And that's important, I think, to reflect back on as we're thinking about, okay, what is our new normal as a church? To lean on our vision and then talk about our methods flowing out of that vision. And again, we're going to talk about that next week. I'm excited about that. But Brian, do you have a final thought here as you wrap us up?
I just want to encourage people to look back at the past weeks and write down. There's just a strength and power of actually writing down, not even typing, but just grabbing a piece of paper or a notepad and writing down what you've learned, what you've tried, maybe even what surprised you. And then take those things that you've learned and experienced, and as you reopen, intentionally put these into your plan. Take advantage of this opportunity and try those things, put into practice the things that you've learned.
Yeah. Well, great. I appreciate you sharing. It's exciting to be a part of this. At Transforming Church Culture, we're all about turning obstacles like this one into opportunities to advance the kingdom of God. And so we appreciate you listening, being a part of us. Check us out online at transformingcc.com. Like us, subscribe, all those things. Just, we appreciate you being a part of this. Thanks, and we'll see you next week.